if they're scared to be able to present ideas that can help further things along, then it puts your business in jeopardy of not only not being able to scale, but it creates. Welcome to the Strategic Thinkers Podcast. This is an episode that I've really been looking forward to because there are so many things that people focus on, and not nearly enough small business owners are thinking about the workplace environment that they create and the level of customer support and customer service that's necessary to be able to not only be able to get customers in, but to be able to retain them. So there are so many people that are focusing on generating leads, but the reality is you do a lot better, and it's easier to be able to get someone to stay with you once you've won them over than it is to go out and find someone new. So this is a conversation that I've been looking forward to because this is a world-renowned expert, and he is someone that will allow us to be able to talk about compassion in business and how to be able to leverage it not just in the workplace, but to make sure that it's baked into the actual customer experience as well. With that, I want to be able to say welcome to Dr. Bruno Cignacco, and thank you so much for coming on. One of the things that I normally like to do is I like to start with just jumping into the questions, but you have a wealth of experience, and I think it's a great opportunity to be able to provide context for people so that they can understand why they should be listening to you, because you're not someone that just started doing this. You have over 30 years of consulting work and research that you've done for decades. So would you like to tell people a bit about yourself?
Thank you very much. I feel very honored to be here. Yes, I'm a consultant on international business. I'm also a university professor, best-selling author. I'm advising companies on international marketing topics and also on compassionate business, which implies that the company can be more profitable but also much more human-oriented. Thank you very much for your invite.
No problem. Okay, well, with that, I know that you've got over 30 years of consulting work that you've done. And when did you realize that the traditional fear-based management approach were actually counterproductive to business success?
This is very important. Every time that we analyze a company to provide them with consultancy services, we discover that more or less there is always some pocket of fear. What I call pocket of fear is some areas of the company when the activities are fear driven. This means that people cannot feel at ease, people cannot feel spontaneous, people cannot cooperate because there are different type of fear. For example, fear of being fired, fear of being, for example, mistaken, fear of rocking the boat by promoting new ideas, fear of sharing resources with others, fear of being outpaced by colleagues. And research has shown that when people are fear driven, people have their discerning skills are diminished, temporarily diminished, and their creative and analytical skills are also temporarily diminished. Why? Because when people are fearful, they cannot connect to others in a meaningful way. But when people are fearful, they cannot develop their creative ideas fully. Why? Because they are feeling threatened and they try to defend themselves from the threat, or they tend to, in some cases, adopt an aggressive attitude toward others. Instead, when people are supporting one another in the workplace, when there is no fear, when there is cooperation, when there is mutual support, kindness, camaraderie, in these workplaces, I observe that there is more creativity, more innovation, more productivity, and this is backed by a very profuse research. There is a lot of research on the importance of kindness and support and creativity. So this is quite important. And fear is a very difficult emotion that prevent people from connecting one another. And in the workplaces, most of the projects are collective. This means that people need to cooperate with one another. If people feel fearful, they cannot connect to one another. They cannot share resources, information, technology, their own ideas. And this workplace productivity tends to go down. And in some cases, people want to leave the company. Why? Because they feel threatened. Even when they're paid a good salary, they feel continually stressed. In some cases, they experience burnout. In some cases, there is a lot of absenteeism. Why? Because people don't want to belong to a workplace where they are not feeling taken care of, they're not appreciated, they're not acknowledged.
Absolutely. I'm thinking back through my corporate experience of the different places that I've worked over the decades, and I can think of some places where fear was at a premium and it ends up being somewhat of a toxic environment. And it definitely siphons off of the creativity that people can come up with. If people are scared that they're going to lose their job or scared to be able to present an idea because they think they'll be embarrassed or something like that, they end up holding back. And that's not something that allows a business to be able to grow. I think when you hire people, one of the things that you're hiring them to be able to do is to help you accomplish your dreams. They should be technically just as invested as you are. And if they're scared to be able to present ideas that can help further things along, then it puts your business in jeopardy of not only not being able to scale, but it creates environments where you're not going to be able to get the proper level of productivity and things that you listed. But I don't have to take my word for it. You've researched companies across different sectors and sizes. What patterns did you notice in organizations that successfully balance human orientated practices with profitability?
Very interesting. There are a few patterns that are very easy to highlight. One important pattern is that companies, instead of focusing on one type of needs regarding their stakeholders, for example, economic needs, they focus on a series of needs. Let's give an example. All stakeholders are individuals and organizations with interest in our company. All stakeholders have different type of needs. When you treat them in a humane way, you focus on various needs. For example, they have economic needs. An employee have economic need, they need to be paid a good salary for their livelihood. But also they have emotional needs. Emotional need implies that this employee need to feel appreciated, they need to feel taken care of, they need to feel acknowledged. For example, when they work hard, they need to feel treated in a kind way, in a respectful way. So these are emotional needs. But also employees, like any other stakeholder, have what I call mental needs. They need to be stimulated mentally, not doing always a boring job, always doing the same task 24/7, but they have to vary their tasks, learn new skills, being trained on a regular basis so they are enhancing their natural skill and developing new capabilities. And employees have also social needs. Social needs that they need to be connected to others within the workplace and outside the workplace. How do you meet these social needs? For example, organizing some business meetings where employees can share their resources with others, but also organizing non-business meetings where employees can meet with the colleagues on a much more casual level and they can connect to one another in a mental and emotional level and they know much more personally so that they can go back to work revitalized, energized, and they can be more productive. Most of the companies tend to focus on one type of need, economic needs. This applies to customers, employees, community members, and others. But the other principle that I observe in companies that are human oriented is that the principle of reciprocity. The principle of reciprocity is quite simple. When you treat people in a kind way, they are more prone to treat you in a reciprocal way, in a kind way too. When you treat people in a dismissive way, they tend to withdraw, they tend not to cooperate with your company. And when I explain this to companies, they understand this very clearly, especially small, medium-sized companies that understand that they cannot succeed on their own in business. They need the support of employees, of customers, of community members, suppliers, the media, the government. So this means that everything in business is interdependent. When you develop strong, long-lasting relationship with these stakeholders, this means relationship where the needs of both parties are fully met, this relationship will bring about economic result for your company. Why? Because these stakeholders are more prone to support your company. Instead, when you are self-centered, you think only about the company's objective, your profit, your market share, your productivity, cutting down costs. You are not connecting to others. You're only thinking about yourself. You don't develop a strong relationship with these stakeholders. And these stakeholders can feel it and they tend to withdraw. They tend not to cooperate because you don't take care for them and they won't take care for you. You cannot force them to cooperate with your company. But if you build strong, long-lasting relationship with these stakeholders, they tend to cooperate much more spontaneously without you asking them. So this is another important principle. But the third principle that I observe is the principle of balance. A company that are successful and they're human-oriented They are not continually thinking about work, or budget, plans, strategy. They have some time for non-business topics. So, for example, they give employees a good break for them to connect to colleagues, have lunch together, to know themselves much more on a personal level, but also
Mhm.
they organize regularly, not only once a year near Christmas, social events where employees can connect to one another, and they foster this spirit of camaraderie, but also they know each other much more personally, and then they can connect much more meaningfully and much more deeply. And then this impact positively on the workplace, because when you know people beyond their role, beyond
Mhm.
their work position, this brings much more cooperation, trust, and kindness.
I think there's a very valid point in that. It goes beyond the work. I think there are people that you can work with someone and you only know what you know about them based on what you're doing in between those work hours. But when you give people an opportunity to be able to see them in a different setting, that perception that you may have initially, you never really get a chance to be able to question it in a way that allows you to be able to learn new things about them. People have layers. If you put people in different positions, you get to see different sides of them, and in some cases it can be something where it's to your advantage. In other cases it can be a warning sign that you may have missed, and that's equally as important because it lets you know how to be able to navigate things like office politics. So I'm in agreement with that. I think one thing that we can pull from this is it's not just big corporations, it's also smaller ones. I know there are a lot of startups and even with solopreneurs that hire out to virtual assistants. If you look at that person as just a grunt worker, you're only going to get the grunt work. But if they have different things where they can contribute to the business and be able to help point things out that you may miss. There's a saying that says you can't see the picture from within the frames. When you're so caught up in what you're doing, sometimes you miss the things that are going on around you and it creates blind spots. So you have to have people around you that will help you be able to identify the things that you may miss because you're so focused on the things that you need to be able to get done. So no matter what the business size is, I think it's really important. And I can definitely speak to, I know how many different places that I worked where it was just all business and there was no relationship beyond just the work. And then there were places where, because it was something where it wasn't just a Christmas party or holiday party, it was something that was set up more regularly. It kind of puts people in a position where even if you don't think that you necessarily get along with someone, it gives you opportunities to find things that you have in common. So it gives you reasons to be able to bond with them, even if it's on things that you may not necessarily talk about in your personal life. In your professional life, it can find and give you different things to bond on, even if it's work. You can say, well, here's the thing that I loved about this project. And then in having that conversation, you can end up identifying other things that were equally as important.
So true, so true. I want to highlight that many companies that are successful, they treat stakeholders as human beings, flesh and bone human beings. And companies that are using the traditional business model that is profit oriented, in some cases, they do not treat stakeholders as human beings. For example, they treat employees as cogs or parts of the organizational machinery. When this part doesn't work well, this part can be discarded. So they are dehumanizing employees. They treat employees as a means to an end. The end will be profits. They don't care for this employee as human beings. They don't care if they have a family or health problems or some other issues. They don't care. They dehumanize employees. And some companies dehumanize customers too. An example will be when they don't care about the specific needs of this customer. They try to sell to this customer any product without finding out what product is suitable for this customer. They consider this customer as a figure in the database, in some cases with no name, in a very impersonal way. And in some cases, this company deceive this customer. They offer products that are the most expensive one. Why? Because this product will bring about higher commission for the salespeople. Customer and employees and any other stakeholder that are treated in a dehumanizing way, they can feel it and they don't like it, and they will run away from these companies. If the employees is working for this company and they find another company with the same salary but is more appreciative, this employee will switch from this company to the other company. And customers have a lot of options in the marketplace. If they don't feel treated in a very respectful way, in a kind and supportive way, this customer will spend their money, their hard-won money, on another company, on another product. Why? Because they don't want to waste their time, their money on a company that doesn't appreciate them.
Yeah, no, that is a very valid point, and something that I try to point out to people is we don't know what they had to do to earn that money. So if someone had to work really hard to be able to earn that money and they're going to spend it with you and you're treating them less than, that devalues all the effort and everything that they put into it. And they have every right to feel like I'm spending my money with you. I have certain level of expectations. The other part to that is definitely understanding the needs of the actual customer, the wants, the needs, the desires, what it is that they have in mind, because you need them just as much as they need you, if not more. And it's something where if you're not taking those things into consideration, you mentioned someone selling something at a higher price point and trying to convince them to be able to get that as opposed to giving them the thing that they need. That goes back to retention for me. Sometimes it's better to sell something at the place that they're at and then circle back later and either upsell or be able to represent it to them once they have a better idea of what kind of results that you can deliver. Because if you don't do that, then they feel forced. It's almost like the car salesman experience where you say, well, I'm just here looking. I just wanted to get a feel for the situation. And then they start trying to give you that hard sell. It's just one more reason for them to want to put some distance between you and them. And you will lose more business than you win by not actually putting the customer first. And then the same goes with the actual clients, or excuse me, the employees. If you're not treating the employee like they bring value and they're just a cog in the wheel, then those cogs can always be replaced. And people require acknowledgement. They require accolades. People want to be able to hear when they do a good job. And if you don't give them things like that, no matter the size of the business, you're setting yourself up for that person to feel replaceable. And then they start looking for ways to be able to find someplace where they're valued enough so that they don't feel that way. So it's
So,
really, really important. Now, I know you've talked about instilling fear and how it can play in actual productivity. What does your research show about the actual business costs of this approach? Because I know personally how many different places I've worked, and when it was fear based, people weren't as productive. When people had to worry about, well, I got to worry about my check, and they had things going on in their personal lives, those are days where people may be scared to take a day off, but they're distracted. And if they're
yes.
distracted, then how productive can they be?
Well, my research shows, and research of other researchers show that when people act in the opposite way to fear, there are a lot of positive results. For example, let's talk about a psychologically safe workplace. This is a workplace where there is no fear. How this would look like? Well, this would look like something like this. Would look like a work environment where people are treating each other with respect, when people are supporting each other when they have some difficulties or some challenges. For example, they can support each other through mentoring, coaching, shadowing, or any type of training. But also, people are allowed to give their voice to others and also promote their ideas, even when they are non traditional ideas. In this type of workplace, there is not groupthink. This means that everyone is thinking in the same way, but diverse views are fostered very frequently. In this type of workplace, cooperation is fostered also, and people are consulted when they have some decision to be made that are affecting them. This type of workplace tend to foster also, whenever possible, a cooperative discussion of big decisions. And in this workplace, people don't feel embarrassed. They can be themselves. They don't feel repressed. They don't feel ridiculed. In this psychologically safe workplace, also, there is no negative side of politics. What I call negative side of politics will include one-upmanship, slandering, gossiping, backbiting, and any other type of negative aspect that you can see in many companies. And research has shown that in these workplaces that are not fear driven, there's higher employee satisfaction, higher customer satisfaction. Why? Because employees that are satisfied tend to serve customer much more effectively. They feel at ease. They want to serve this customer. But also in these workplaces, there is lower absenteeism, lower turnover. So this is very important. Why? Because people want to go to work. Lower absenteeism implies that they feel that going to work is meaningful. And lower turnover, people want to remain in the company. Lower stress level too, and this impact positively on the bottom line. This means that impact positively on profits. So this means that, and these workplaces, people feel that they belong to the company, they feel appreciated, and they feel that they're contributing to the company's mission in a meaningful way. So, and in these
Absolutely.
workplaces, people are appreciated on a regular basis. For example, with thank you notes, with bonuses, with events that recognize their achievements. So obviously there is some research on fear and how fear affect negatively the cognitive processes. For example, critical thinking, fear affect negatively creative thinking, decision making. Why? Because you're focusing on threats. But there is very profuse research on the effect of a non-fear work environment on productivity, on profitability. So this means that it's the opposite to fear. So psychologically, workplaces are not fear-driven, and in these workplaces, you can clearly observe the positive benefit, not only on a relational level, but also on an economic level in the company.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's some things to unpack in that. There are office politics, especially here in the States, where it can be competitive, and there are environments that foster that intentionally because they feel like it brings the best out productivity wise. And the reality is that's not always the case. If you have people that, well, I'll speak from my experience. I know that I've worked places where there are people that were really good at knowing how to undercut somebody else. It didn't mean that they were the most productive employee. It didn't mean that they were the ones that were going to be the best employees. There are the people that are good at selling, and there are some people that are good at workers. And there are the workers that they bring the consistency. They raise the floor of the actual business and they set that standard. So, like you said, a happy workplace that reflects on how people interact with their customers. So, if you have something where someone has a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress, and then they get on the phone and the person's leaning into them or having a bad day themselves, that's not going to be a good experience for either one. And it comes across in the conversation. It's sometimes not just what you say, but it's in your tone. And when someone answers the phone or when they're on a call or wherever they're interacting with an actual customer, you can tell when someone's happy. And you can tell when someone's just there to get a check. And when you get a feeling that someone's there just to be able to get a check, as a customer, as a consumer, I don't really want to have that kind of deeper connection with that person because what I feel like is the next thing that's going to come out of their mouth is they're going to start telling me about all the reasons they don't like their job. And that's not what I'm there for. So having something where it's set up where that person feels good about where they're at comes across in the customer experience. So it's not just it's not just the employee that benefits from having a great place where sometimes it is a thank you note. Sometimes it's understanding that someone has something going on in their personal life and they need the day off or they came in because they knew there was a big project coming up or something like that and saying, you know what, listen, we've got it. Focus on home because we want to make sure that you have that right. That's one of the things to actually appreciate about Europe as far as across the pond, setting work hours and allowing people to focus more on home than they do on work because allowing people to be able to not have to worry about home as much allows them to be able to focus and lock in more when they're actually in the office as opposed to that's not our problem. So I think that's a big thing. And then I'd like to be able to bring it back around to the smaller businesses because there are a lot of small businesses that don't really have an HR department, someone that can step in and be able to bring up some of the things that you're talking about and actually highlight, okay, well, what's your goal? If your goal is to be able to get people to be productive, you have to know who you hired. Some people need to be nurtured. Some people need to be pushed a little bit more because they don't know what their actual capabilities are. If you don't base it on the individual and you just do something across the board, then you run the risk of rubbing people the wrong way and alienating people on your staff. And again, these are the people that are interacting with your customers when you're not there. So if you're not paying attention to things like that, then you're setting yourself up to really be able to run into some issues. So we talked about some of the problems that people may have, but let's talk about the impact and the insights that you can share with people. So you call principles like generosity, gratitude, kindness, timeless. How did that translate into concrete business advantages in today's competitive market? So right now, there's a shortage of jobs here in the States. So there are a lot of people that are a little more willing to take what they can get as opposed to taking something that they want or finding something that they want. When it comes to when things are picking back up and people are in a position where they have a little bit more say, I see these things as things that serve as a differentiator so that it's not someone feeling like they're forced to work someplace. They're finding some place that they actually want to be able to work.
Very interesting. Well, let's talk about each of these principles in detail.
Mhm.
So, for example, kindness. Kindness is a very important principle that why I call timeless or perennial, because we can talk about the importance of kindness today, and we can talk about the importance of kindness in business 20 years later. Why? Because it doesn't have any specific relation to a specific time. It's always of value. And when you are kind to people, people come, you are personalizing the relationship. When you treat customer in a kind way, they're more prone to come back and recommend your company to other potential customers. When you treat employees in a kind way, these employees, for example, they're more prone to leave positive reviews about your company in some platform like Glassdoor, because these employees feel at ease, they feel respected, they feel appreciated. So kindness, according to research, bring about more kindness, bring about a positive cycle of reciprocity. The same apply with generosity. There is a full chapter that I talk about generosity and gratitude in my book, The Art of Compassionate Business. And generosity, why is so important? Because most of the companies tend to be, especially big companies, but I see some medium-sized companies too and small companies, that they tend to be a bit stingy. They think about only about obtaining more sales, obtaining more productivity, obtaining lower costs, obtaining much more market share, more customers. And what about giving? So in business and in life is a cycle that should be in equilibrium, in balance, include giving and receiving, like breathing in, breathing out. But this applies to business too. When you are generous to different stakeholders, for example, to employees, to customer, community members, this brings about a positive cycle of generosity. These stakeholders are more prone to be generous with you. For example, you try to sell a product that is adequate for this customer, and you give your heart, you give all your knowledge, your expertise, you comment about your experience, your technical knowledge, and you try to advise them kindly, only giving a direction and a suggestion about the product that could be adequate for them. Well, this customer feel that you are taking care of them, and they're more prone to get committed or loyal to this company and also leave positive reviews online. And if you are selling exactly the same product as your competitor,
Mhm.
and your competitor doesn't treat customer in a personalized way, in a kind and supportive way, well, these uh, customers are more prone to choose your company. Why? Because you are differentiating the customer service by personalizing it. But generosity, I want to mention this much more clearly. When you're generous with customers, for example, you are selling cups. You are selling cups like this one, for example, to drink tea. And these cups are very nice design, colorful. What gift you can include with this cup?
Mhm.
Maybe you can offer some like a little tea bags to use with the cups. So as a gift to enjoy a tea in that cup. Well, this little gesture make a lot of difference. Why? Because when you are generous, you are giving more than they expect. You are more prone to delight customer. What they mean, delighting in marketing implies exceeding customer needs. So you give more than they expect and you surprise them in a positive way. So you exceed your promise. And this customer feel indebted with you and they're more prone to give you back in return. They might leave positive reviews, they might recommend your product to other customers. Instead, when you're stingy, when you're self-centered, when you are non-generous, this customer feel that you are withdrawing, you're not giving your best. And this customer is more prone to leave negative reviews or might not come back to your company or might push other customer away. So generosity begets generosity. The same with gratitude. Gratitude implies appreciating others, appreciating how they are, their contribution. For example, if employees work hard, you have to appreciate them in a very clear and overt way, if possible in a personalized way. For example, sign handwritten thank you note to this employee or a bonus or made this employee appear in the new company's newsletter
Hmm.
as a very important achiever that contributed to the company's mission. Employees want to feel proud, they want to feel that they count, they want to feel valued. And in the case of customer, you have to appreciate their time. In some cases, customers have a lot of time scarcity. They can't waste time. Even if they come to your company, they don't buy your products, you have to be appreciative. Why? Because they spend some time checking your product. And you can even
That part.
recommend other companies' product that can be suitable for them because you are not attached to profit in a very exclusive way. You try
Hmm.
to provide with good customer service. You try to serve customers. And when you adopt an attitude of service, means that you try to provide them with the highest value possible, you are more prone to obtain high profit. Instead, when you adopt an attitude of selling, this means that you try to sell the most expensive product, the one that gets you more profit without thinking about customer. This push customer away. This pushes customer away. Why? Because they feel that you are not for them, but you are for you.
Now, there's several things in that that I want to be able to circle back to. One, generosity and gratitude. There are two things that come along with that. My mind went to there's a health food store that I go to, and I was happy to be able to go there. They have a great product, but I know when it came time to be able to leave, it was I would buy some health drinks, and then they would charge for the cups. And my thing is, so I just gave you money, sat here and waited for you to be able to build everything out, and now you want to charge me for the cups. And it was something where that left a bad taste, where it was okay, so I'm spending money with you, but now you're figuring out ways to be able to add on to that actual price. And that was something that started to make me go, you know what, I'm going to start figuring out how to be able to make it myself, because I don't want to have to worry about paying for the cups. That feels like something that should have been thrown in. There's also the opportunities to be able for gratitude. Like you said, someone doesn't always have to spend money, because there's a difference between someone coming in and making a purchase right then and nurturing a situation so that if it's not a no, it's a not right now. Sometimes people may have a little bit of time and they say, well, I'm just going to go in and check it out, and then I'll come back in and make the purchase later. If you're just focused on the sale and they don't buy right then you don't care about them, then that's a problem. I remember being younger, and there was a big man, tall man shop that I that was right across from where I used to work when I was on at the record labels. And I knew that I needed to kind of start stepping up the clothes and things that I was wearing. And I went in, and the clothes were more expensive than my salary was, but I knew I had to kind of work my way up to it. And I remember a salesperson talking to another salesperson saying, "Oh, well, he doesn't buy a lot, so I don't have time for him." And my thing was, you know what? I still got to go through what I got to go through. I got to get what I need to get. And a salesperson came over, and his thing is, "Can I help you?" And I was like, I'm not here to spend a lot of money. I'm just trying to work my way up to it." And his thing is, it's okay. And that was something that as I started to make more money and over the years, that became my go to person. And then the other woman, once she realized, oh, okay, so you are making money and you can come in and spend a lot of money, she would come over and ask if she can help. And I'm like, no, like I don't want to work with you. Like, I know that there's commission based in this. And based on the fact that you said that, I will never work with you. So it's something where you have to be able to understand it's not just about the purchase in that moment. It's about the experience. And when you create a great experience for someone, whether it be the customer or whether it be the actual employees, you're giving them reasons to care. And if people care, then they're willing to do more for you. It's where you listed Glassdoor. Sometimes it's really hard to be able to find good people to work for you. But if you have employees that are talking about how great the environment is and how much they love working at that company, then that's more reason for people to be able to say, well, I'd love to be able to work someplace like that. And then you don't have to work as hard to be able to find good people. But if you treat people poorly and they see a constant churn, I can tell you how many different times where people will reach out and I can say, well, I saw that job listing last month, and then it went down for a couple of weeks and now it's back up again. What did you do so that someone went in and then 2 weeks into that job, all of a sudden decided, nah, this isn't for me? Somewhere in there, your process alienated that person and made them feel uncomfortable enough that they've preferred being unemployed than being employed by you. So those were some of the things that came to mind as you were walking through that. And I think it's important to be able to highlight kindness, generosity, gratitude. Those things are timeless because those things matter. And when we're talking about things being reasons for people to want to be able to buy and people to want to spend time with you, those are things that factor into it. My brother told me something when I was younger. He said, the only people that care if you're upset are people that care about you. So if you're having a bad day, the average person doesn't really care if you're having a bad day. But if you give someone a reason to care about you, then all of a sudden someone will stop and say, you know what, are you okay? Like, what's wrong? And that is that moment where you can get that release. And then it allows you to go back to what you need to be able to do and be productive. So I think those are things that are baked into what you're talking about. And I think it's really important and part of what you were saying with a safe workspace. So, what does a psychologically safe workplace actually look like? And is this part of what you were talking about, or are you talking about something else
Yes,
and on top of
yes,
that?
yes. We mentioned a bit before the characteristic of psychologically safe workplace is a workplace where people feel at ease, they don't feel stressed, they feel that they can cooperate. There is a trust-based work environment where people can express their ideas, but also in these workplaces, people are not feeling micromanaged. This is a very
Hmm.
important issue in most companies, micromanaging. This means that companies tend to dictate every single step that the employee should take without allowing employees to be autonomous, without allowing employees to uh, express themselves using their skills, their experience, their expertise. And these employees feel very embarrassed in some cases because they have to ask for permission, even for a small decision like buying paper clips. And so these employees feel treated like children. And this shows that when you micromanage people, you're not trusting them because you don't try to control them fully. You don't allow them to express themselves in the way that they can feel that is more suitable. And you are fearful also because you're controlling and you're fearful that they will make some mistakes or they will use the wrong resource or they will have the wrong knowledge. This is not good because when you're distrusting them, this generates a workplace of distrust, a distrust-based workplace, and this brings about a lot of problems, lack of cooperation, low morale, employee dissatisfaction. What I observe in some surveys, employee survey, that when the workplace is not psychologically safe, employees feel demotivated. They go to
Mm.
work only for the paycheck. They don't want to go to work if they have the option, and if they find a company that pays slightly less than that company, but they feel more appreciated, they will take the second option, this second company. Why? Because they don't feel that they are treated in a respectful way. They don't feel that they count. In some cases, they
Yeah.
feel that what they are doing is meaningless because the company does not highlight how their contribution add value to the company's mission and add value to different stakeholders. So these employees feel worthless in many cases, even they're not worthless, and they feel in some cases that they're treated in an instrumental way, means that they're means to an end. These psychologically unsafe workplaces bring about the worst results. Why? Because when employees are feeling treated in a disrespectful way, they are
Mm.
disrespected at work, these employees are prone to leave lots of negative reviews over the web, on the web, but also this company has a very low reputation. So when companies, for example, exploit employees or micromanage employees or don't delegate tasks, this means that everything will be controlled and fear-based. This company reputation tend to go down, and this push away potential talented employee that could be working
Yeah.
for that company. And but also
Yeah.
when the company reputation goes down, this also bring about a reduction of the brand image, lowering the brand image, and also in some cases, a high quality investors do not want to connect to this company, to invest in that company. And in many cases, these employees that are mistreated want to express their view, and you see this company portrayed in the media in a sensationalistic way, in a negative way. So this means that psychologically unsafe workplaces are bad for productivity, for creativity, for cooperation, for the generation of trust. On the other side, psychologically safe workplaces, as we saw, bring about higher employee satisfaction, higher customer satisfaction, lower turnover, lower absenteeism, and also bring about more productivity, more creative ideas. Why? Because when people feel safe, they don't feel threatened, they can think in a non-traditional way. They can bring about some exploration on new approaches, new processes, new business model, new products, innovative services. Instead, when people feel controlled, the work environment is fear-driven. They feel unsafe. They might be ridiculed if they propose new idea. Well, these workplaces tend to be less creative, and people tend to keep their idea for themselves.
I think there's some very key things to circle back on with that. One, I want to make sure that I'm tying it to entrepreneurs because I know we're talking about the corporate side, but a lot of this applies to not just the bigger companies, but the smaller companies. Again, there are people that don't have HR. So if you don't have someone that feels comfortable being able to come back to you and say that what you said or what you did made them uncomfortable, you're not going to know. And one of the things that I thought about was I know how many times I've been in a store or work with someone and they talk down to the person that worked for them. That leaves a bad taste for me. Like if you can't get your stuff together to the point where you have to talk down to that person in front of a customer, that's a bad sign. That tells me that that's how you treat people once you get comfortable. So if it's something where I realize you're talking down to the employee, then that's going to make me feel like, okay, well, once I'm a customer and I actually need you for something and you already have my money, how are you going to treat me? So that's one thing that I thought of. And then a very key point was trust and micromanaging. If you take the time to actually create a job description and interview and go through the whole process of training someone, then technically you don't need to micromanage that person. If you need to micromanage that person, it's because you did a poor job in training them. Or you did a poor job in figuring out who you were going to hire. Maybe you hired someone because you had a need and you knew that they weren't ready to be able to meet the task that you had, then that's on you. There has to be a sense of accountability when it comes to that. So I wanted to bring that back around to entrepreneurs because there are so many people that head out into starting their own business and they know how to be able to do the work themselves. Guilty of it myself. This is one of the reasons why I'm a solopreneur because I want to be so mindful of everybody that I work with that sometimes I put too much emphasis on it and I need to make sure that I'm focused on the business side of it. There are the people that don't do that at all. They are people that know how to do the work, but they don't have that bedside manner. They don't know how to be able to work with other people. So those are some of the people that are the worst managers, supervisors, and things like that. I actually had a post on LinkedIn that went viral where someone said if someone said that that's not my job, then that's someone that needs to be fired. And my follow-up to that was, well, if someone says that's not my job, my question is, well, what would make you say that? Like why what led up to that? Not I'm not going to just look at the comment that someone made. I want to know what led up to you feeling that level of frustration because that means I missed something. So I think it's important to not micromanage. I think it's important to have a certain level of trust because when someone knows that you trust them, then they're willing to give more. You're not just trying to build brand champions on the customer side. You're trying to build brand champions as far as employees, people that will rave about you, bring in other talent and people that want to be able to work. There are so many different surveys that talk about best places to work, best cities to work. When you have that nurturing kind of environment or compassionate environment, as the way that you had put it, that gives people reason to want to be able to partner with you, whether it's employee, whether it's a customer, whether it's someone that you may collaborate with that's adjacent to you. If that person is really into being able to see to their employees and make sure that everybody around them feels comfortable and happy with the whole experience, and then they say, well, I'm going to collaborate with you and they see how you treat your employee, that's going to give them reason not to want to be able to work with you because you may decide that you can talk to their employees or the people in their life that way. So I think it's important to really to be mindful of not just what you're doing, but how it looks to other people because perception is going to dictate the sales, is going to dictate what kind of environment that you create and how it affects everybody around you, not just what you see in that moment, but it has a ripple effect that can carry over. Someone can vent online about having a bad day because their manager or the CEO or someone yelled at them. And it could end up being seen by someone that was considering working there, considering working with them as a customer or a client. You have to always be mindful of those things. And I think what you're highlighting is the ability to be more cognizant of things like that. Well, now we're building up a lot of pressure on some people that may not have that as a skill set. So let's talk about one thing for business owners who recognize that they've been leading through fear. what's the first principle that they should focus on to start beginning that transformation and start being more aware of how they're treating people and how it's perceived by everyone around them?
Very important. Well, we have to reflect on the priorities in business. Most people in business think that the most important resource is funds, information, technology, now artificial intelligence. And we have to understand that the most important resource in business is the human being. You cannot succeed without the human being. The human being is a meta resource. What I mean by meta resource is a resource that generates other resources.
Hmm.
So the human being generates business models, business processes, procedures, new product, new services. So new way of distributing the product, new ways of promoting the product, new ways of engaging with customers. And so we care for the human being that is the most relevant resource. And the human being could be customer, could be employees, community members, suppliers, business partners. When we care for the human being and we treat them in a humane way, means we recognize that there are individual flesh and bone individuals with different type of needs, economic need, emotional need, mental needs, and social needs. When you treat them in a respectful way, when you develop agreements that are win-win, that you win and the customer wins. You win as a company and the employee wins. You win and the community wins. And this applies to small companies too. When you develop strong relationship with every single stakeholder, all the business indicators on the key performance indicators such as profitability, productivity, efficiency, they take care of by themselves. So this means that this strong relationship will help you achieve this indicator in a much more effortless manner. Instead, when you focus only on key performance indicators, exclusively on key
Hmm.
performance indicators, you try to only achieve the highest profit possible. In many cases, you run the risk of achieving this key performance indicator by all means, by exploiting employees, by deceiving customers, by polluting the environment, by bringing about a negative impact on communities with your, for example, business model or manufacturing activities. So this is quite important. So what I always recommend when I train companies is asking as a business owner a series of questions that I call self-reflection questions.
Hmm.
How can I be more generous with all the stakeholders? How can I be more generous? Because I know that when I am generous, I bring about a positive cycle of generosity. How can some people might say, but I don't have material resources to be generous. You don't have to be generous only in a material way. You can be generous in a non-material way. For example, if you are the manager and you have a very small company and you're managing all the employees, there are no department, no internal areas, and you're managing, you might see some employees that are facing difficulties. How you can be generous as a manager with these employees? Can you provide them with training? You are giving them training. Can you give them coaching? Can you provide them with some information? Can you give them a year to listen to them, listen to their fears, listen to their uncertainties? Can you provide them with some flexible time so that they have a work-life balance? So in some cases, generosity can be appreciated when it's done in a non-material way. This means that you can give time, you can give advice, you can give information, you can give training, and you can give thanks to them, but also being grateful or expressing gratitude in a very clear way, because when you appreciate people, and they're acting in a positive way, you're reinforcing positive behavior. They keep on acting in the positive way. If the employee will have been working for several days over time, and this employee contributed to your company's project in a very meaningful way, and they met the deadlines, and you don't appreciate this gesture,
Yeah.
this act of goodwill, this employee in the future might feel that I will contribute to this company if I don't feel value, I don't feel that I count. So appreciation help people keep on acting in a positive way, but also appreciation bring about a positive cycle of appreciation. And appreciation doesn't apply only to the workplace; can be applied to customer, can be applied to other stakeholders, suppliers, and so on. and also being compassionate. How can I be more compassionate with different stakeholders? What is compassion? Understanding how they think, understanding how they feel, and try to help them, and try to help the stakeholders whenever possible. Provide with some advice, providing flexible time, provide with some technical information, and so on.
Mhm.
Because compassion bring about a positive cycle of compassion. When you treat people in a much more compassionate way and understand that we can all face difficulty, when you face difficulty, they're more prone to support you because they give you back.
Yeah, no, again, there's a lot to unpack with that. One, I think there are so many people now that have experienced the work from home environment where I know for me, it's something that I started making it almost a requirement on my way out of the corporate world into going out into entrepreneurship because what I found was I was more productive working from home than I was in the office. And it's because there were people that wanted to break their day up. And there were people that would say, "Oh, what's going on with you?" And I'm trying to focus. I'm trying to knock out the work that I need to be able to knock out. And then now that people are being forced to kind of go back into the office again, there's that adjustment of trying to go back in. And if someone has home issues, where it's something where they have something going on at home and they need to be able to work from home, sometimes it's better to allow that person to be able to work from home so that they can still make sure that they give you that time because in my experience the people that get to work from home they don't work just the regular hours of the 9 to 5. I know that in when I worked in the city it was something that it would take me at least an hour and a half 2 hours to get to and from work. When I got to work from home my thing is I will gladly give you those 2 hours back because you saved me the commute. I didn't have to spend that extra time and I will give you those hours back, so I'm working till 7 8 o'clock because I enjoyed the work that I was doing. I felt like they were honoring me and making sure that I was able to be in the best position to be productive. So why wouldn't I give them back those actual results? So I think it's the little things. One of the other things that stood out to me was there are some people that have communication issues. So I can imagine it would freak some people out who were saying, "Oh, be more compassionate." If that's not your style, if that's not how you come across, if you have a history of being someone that was really hard on people, and all of a sudden you show up and you're trying to be nice, that's going to freak some people out. They're gonna be a little concerned about it. So when we're talking about one thing, there are other ways to be able to start to show that gratitude, the kindness, and it can be done a personal way. It can be something as simple as letting someone know that you know their name. There are some businesses and companies that are large enough where there's so many employees that you're surprised when a CEO or someone senior knows your name. It can be something as simple as that. But people want to feel valued. And like you said, sometimes you can work on a big project and you put in hours and all kind of this extra effort. And when it's done, they're just like, "Oh, yeah, great job, everybody." And then on to the next thing. You don't know what sacrifices that person had to make in order to make sure that you met that deadline. So acknowledging things like that to say, you know what, I know we pushed you guys. We asked you to work some extra hours. So what we're going to do is we're going to buy everybody lunch, or we're going to do this as a way to be able to show our appreciation. Sometimes it could just be putting someone's name on it. I know when I worked at Condé Nast back in the public there were times where we put a lot of work in, and when they would put the magazines out, assistants didn't get their name in the magazine. But I know we were doing the bulk of the work. So it was something that now they've kind of moved away from that, and they get to get that same level of acknowledgement. But there are so many different things that you can do that don't necessarily have money attached to it. Putting someone's name on it so that they can see that there is something credible. Like you said with training, if you know that someone has a strength and has a weakness, helping them work on that weakness is something that prepares that person for all the things that they want to be able to do in their lives. And if it's something that you can add that doesn't really cost you anything, it means the world to them because they know that you actually took the time to figure out something that they wanted to work on and allow them to be able to build up that strength so that it builds them up in life beyond just doing the work that's related to the jobs. There's a lot to be able to think of. It's when you're trying to think of that one thing. It doesn't have to be monetary. It could be something as simple as adding someone's name to something and giving them credit for the work that they did within it, acknowledging them in pitches, presentations, any of the things that you're putting out so that someone can say, you know what, I put in this extra effort. And now I can see that you actually appreciated it. It doesn't always have to be monetary. It can be in other ways. I think those are things that are really important. And it's where kindness, generosity, and understanding who you're working with actually matters. So I think those things are important. I think it's also important to know who you're promoting, because I've worked places where people were promoted, and those people that were promoted to be supervisors and managers weren't good with people. So it's find out ways to be able to show people that they can advance in their career, but put them in a position to be successful. Because if you hire someone that's not good with people, and that person runs a bunch of people off, and then eventually you have to realize, okay, so they want the problem, you're the problem, you put that person in a position to fail. So it's important to be able to say, okay, I know what your strengths are. I know what your weaknesses are. If you're not someone that's good with people, I'm going to give you something where I can advance you and make sure that you get to take strides in your career. But I'm not going to put you in a position where you have to talk to people and have them report to you. I'm going to put you in a position where you can focus on your work. If someone is good with people and they're not as good with just locking in on the work, I don't mind seeing them as a supervisor or manager, because now your task is managing the mood of the people. You're making sure that everybody feels appreciated. You're making sure that everyone feels the love. And that could be your gift. And if that's your gift, why not put that person in a position where they can be a manager that knows how to get all the best out of all of the people that work under them, as opposed to someone that leads by fear?
So true. So true. I agree. And I want to add to this comments that fear is never good in the workplace, and fear with customers is never good. Business owners and people working for companies should analyze, is there any fear in this work environment? Is there any fear in the relationship with different stakeholders? Because fear break up relationships. And we need to understand that the relationship are the most important pillar in any business success. If you get rid of fear, most of the objective will be achieved in a much more effortless way. But there is fear, we saw that fear hinder creativity, productivity,
Mm.
and any good ideas are left aside because people are not taking the risk. So this is quite important. Not only foster positive value, positive principle like generosity, compassion, kindness, gratitude, but also eliminating all these negative aspects that could appear in the workplace and any other business relationship, like fear, for example.
Well, now I know we said we wouldn't really necessarily get into the how. So I'm going to give a what type of scenario, because let's talk about the people that are working someplace and they're seeing a lot of layoffs. And that, when we're talking about fear, that is a big fear. When you start to see a company struggling and you realize that they're doing layoffs, that fear of, well, could I be the next person, can affect productivity. So I think there are also people that should take the time to realize, if you start to have a certain level of layoffs, you actually have to take the time to be able to say, now I need to make sure that I explain what's going on to the people that are here, so that they're not spending half their day or the better part of their time worried about whether or not they're going to be next. So when we're talking about one thing, that could be one thing that you address. And that's a really big thing, because if people start to see people getting laid off, those that are in a position to be able to leave and go someplace else and get another job are going to start looking for their exit strategy. Those that need that check are going to spend so much time worried about, am I going to be the next person? Am I going to get called into that room? That's something that could bring down the productivity. And if you're trying to pull yourself up out of a bad position where you had to lay people off, if you don't address that, you're only exasperating the problem. You're making it so that it gets even worse, because now the people aren't productive because they're too busy worried about whether or not they're going to get fired. They've seen people work hard and get fired. So what's their incentive to work harder to be able to pull you up out of that situation? So I think that's something else that I thought would be important to highlight, but I want to get your thoughts on it, because you've
Yeah.
worldwide, you're seeing it a lot more than I
Okay.
do.
What I observed, especially during COVID and post-COVID period, is that companies that were laying off lots of employees, many of them were acting in a compassionate way. And you can say, how can they act in a compassionate way when they're firing employees? Well, these compassionate companies were acting in a very distinctive way. How they were doing this? Employees that need to be fired were given enough notice, but also employees that needed to be fired because they were cutting down on personnel were given training on how to develop their CVs, training on job interviews, and in many cases, this company tried to refer these employees to the competing organization. So this means that this is very, very incredible to see. But I saw this personally, and so this company, let's say that a company is an airline and is cutting down on personnel? Well, they were cutting down, but they were recommending to other airlines. Or supermarket, they were recommended to another supermarket. In some cases, employees were also trained to diversify their skills. Okay, you know
Hmm.
what? You have been working always in the marketing department. Well, let's get new skills. Let's train you so that you can develop new skill and you have broadened your view when looking for new jobs. So this means that even in difficult times, you can be compassionate. And when you face difficulties, when you have a critical circumstance that the company is going through, the worst thing that you could do is keep employees in a very uncertain situation without telling them what is going on, with keeping them in a fearful mode and without supporting them. Because in many cases, employees devote more time working for that company than the time that they stay at home. They have devoted, in many cases, lot of years. And when you get rid of them like a faulty piece of machinery, they feel dismissed, they feel demoralized, they feel mistreated and disrespected. The least thing that you could do when you face difficult times, try to help them. Because when you help them, this is more prone to have a positive impact on this employee, and this employee will have a positive memory and is less prone to leave negative
Yes.
reviews on your company. So I remember some company that fired a lot of employees during COVID, and then they wanted to take these employees back, and no employee wanted to come
Hmm.
back because they feel
Hmm.
mistreated. They were fired with no compensation and without
Hmm.
notice. Instead, other companies were very caring and tried to recommend, in some cases, suggesting to the human resource department of the competing company that they should take this employee. Why? Because they acted in that way, they have this achievement. The company is making the reference, acting like a referee for this employee, so that this employee can be employed by the competing company. This is incredible, and this shows that companies, even in difficult times, can be compassionate because at the end, what have in common all stakeholders? They're all human beings. Even
Hmm.
the CEO or the one at the lowest level of the hierarchy or the one cleaning the bathroom or the one working for customer service, any stakeholder is a human being and human beings always face difficulties. When you don't help others in difficult times, they're less prone to help your small business, your organization in difficult times. Instead, when you are caring for them, even during difficult times, this brings about a positive impact on an emotional level, and these stakeholders tend to be grateful. They tend to return your favor, to return your support in a positive way.
Absolutely. I love that. I know that there are people that will give a reference, but there aren't a lot of people that will take those extra steps to make sure that they help someone have a softer landing. If they know that this is something that's coming up, it's to me, it's something that should absolutely be told to that person so that they can prepare for it. I know I remember working someplace and they knew that they wanted to get rid of the guy and they let him go on vacation. And my thing is, that is one of the worst, shadiest things that I could imagine you would do because you know how much money you spend on vacation. You know how much money you spend planning a vacation and doing all the rest of that. So to come back and then realize you were fired when, if they gave him the notice, he could have said, you know what, I'm going to cancel that vacation, keep that money in my pocket, and it allows me to have a little more runway for me to be able to find that next job. I think all of those things factor into it. One of the things that, or at least one of the reasons that I put together what I call an entrepreneurial assessment is to identify the type of entrepreneur that you would be, because that's where you're starting at. But by the time you start to grow and scale, if your business isn't based on who you are as a person and you're building it based on everybody else's business model, and expectations start to come back to you and people say, well, you know, why are you doing this, why are you doing that? If it's not authentic to who you are, then it's not going to be something that you'll understand, those nuanced things. You won't know that those are things that you need to be able to do. And in those situations, if you're not that type of person, hire someone that is. So then this way, that's not a requirement of you. If that's not part of who you're, a part of your DNA, if that's not part of who you are, hire someone that can be that person. Like I said, if I know someone is good with people, I would prefer to have that person as a manager or a supervisor than that person that is just hard on everyone and knows how to crack the whip. As they say, you could get the carrot or you could get the stick. I want someone that hands them the carrot as opposed to the stick, because they will bring the best out of those people. Because in crisis, one of two things happen: people do the work out of fear and they do just enough, or people band together and say, you know what, we're all in this together. And because we're all in this together, I'm going to give you my all. And that's how businesses get pulled up out of rough situations and rough times. I think that's really important to be able to highlight. And I love the fact that you're talking about even with competitors, they were able to reach out and let them know like this isn't someone that was fired because they were a bad employee. They were let go because we're in a position where we have to start focusing on what we need to do to be able to maintain the business. And it had nothing to do with them, it had nothing to do with their performance or anything else. That's an extra measure that people won't forget. And when you're back in a position to be able to do more, they remember things like that. It's the saying, you know, you have to think about how you treat people on your way up because when you're on your way down, these are going to be people that you run into again. So all those extra measures, all of these things are things that don't necessarily require money. This require a certain level of compassion and empathy to understand that everyone is a person. So I know one of the things I used to always tell people is whatever floor I was working on, I was like, your 12th floor, 13th floor, important. When you get down to the first floor, you're an average person like everybody else. And unless you walk around with a name tag, nobody's going to know who you are, what you do. So nobody cares when you're on the first floor. You're only important on whatever floor, whatever office that you work in. When you get down to the first floor, all they know is how you treat people. So remember what it's like to be on the first floor so that when you get up to whatever office you're at or whenever you walk into that place, you're not building out of fear. You're building out of something that allows you to be able to bring the best out of people. If you're a small business owner, keep these things in mind because that's how you retain people. If you're a small business owner, one of the hardest things to be able to do is to keep training people over and over and over again because that's time you could be spending on focusing on the business and how you could scale, and then you'll be in a position to hire more of the people that you want to be able to have. So I want to thank you because this is one of the things that I really wanted to cover with this conversation. And you threw in something extra that I didn't know anything about as far as people actually helping people get jobs when they laid them off. That's something that I'm glad that we were able to put out there because there are people that find themselves in that position and they're not doing those things. They're the people that hired and got the press of, oh, we hired these people. And then as soon as they ran into problems, they fired them and never mentioned anything about it. But they still got the press of hiring these people and getting that good press. In those situations, if you know you have layoffs coming up, have a conversation. Let people know what's coming up. Let them know, listen, you know what? I know it's a risk of if I tell them, then I may not get the same level of work, but you're probably not going to get the same level of work because they're worried about whether or not they're going to get fired anyway. So at least if you give them some kind of heads up, yes, there'll be some people that may leave early or decide that they're not going to do the work or feel some kind of way, but that lets you know who to never bring back. And it'll also let you know who you want to be able to have stay if you can. So those are things that I think are really important. And I want to thank you for bringing that to light.
Thank you very much. Yes, this is so important. And we all go back to the most important topic that is treating human beings as human beings. Because at
Mhm.
the end, the roles are important for organizing things within the company or within the small business, but beyond the role is the human being. So if we don't understand that people are more than the role, they're real individual with fears, with hopes, with dreams, with family, with health issues. We don't understand that we are all this way. We cannot build relationship on commonalities. What I always observe that in business, most of the relationships are built on power, on hierarchy. I am the manager, you are the subordinate. I am from the marketing department, you are from the administrative department. I am working for this company, you are the customer. But if we instead build relationship be focusing on commonalities, what is the commonality? We're all human beings. We all have economic needs, emotional needs, mental needs, social needs. And we can only build strong relationship when the needs of both parties are fully met. If we meet the needs of one party at the expense of the need of the other party, this relationship will break up. These win-lose agreements, they're not short-lived. They're not long-lived because they're very short-lived. They mean that they last very short time. Instead, when you build robust relationship, when you take into account the needs of each party and you build this relationship with a view of long-term, a long-term perspective, you are more prone to thrive in business.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, with that, I want to give you the opportunity to tell people more about what you have going on right now. I know you've got books out. I know you have a big community that you have. Where can people find you and learn more about you so that they can continue having this conversation beyond this podcast?
Thank you very much for the invite. They can find me www.brunocignacco.com. They can find my latest book titled The Art of Compassionate Business in the second edition, published by Routledge, in any bookshop online and offline. It's sold worldwide in any bookshop, Amazon, for example, and any other bookshop online, offline. But also they can find me on LinkedIn. I generally post some articles and some cases on LinkedIn. They can join me on LinkedIn and they're more than welcome. Thank you very much.
No problem. This has been great for me. I'm human centered first. I don't want to just work with a client. I want to understand their surrounding circumstances so that I know how best to be able to support them in their efforts. I think everyone has their own definition of success. And when you can understand what that is, then you understand how to be able to support them and making sure that they achieve it. Because every time they achieve it, they don't forget who helped them get there. And those are things that get repaid in so many different ways that it's way too hard to measure, but you know it when you see it. So I want to thank you because you've contributed and you've not only done it for me, but you've done it for the audience. And I thank you for it. I will say like, share, and subscribe. I will make sure that I have the links within the description and make sure that you're able to find Dr. Bruno and make sure that we're able to make that connection for anyone that wants to be able to learn more. But with that, I will say thank you so much for your time. This has been a pleasure. And yeah, I look forward to be able to connect with you as well. I know there's going to be more things coming up, and I would love to be able to partner with you and bring you in on more things that I'm working on.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And I will see everyone next time. This has been the Strategic Thinkers Podcast, and this is an episode focused on compassion in the workplace and compassion just in general with remembering everyone is a human being and the importance of that because it pays its dividends in so many different ways. Thank you so much. Thank you for tuning in to the Strategic Thinkers Podcast. Remember, when you can make the inconvenient convenient, people are willing to pay you for the experience. The better the experience, the more they'll not only pay you, but help others pay you. Serving as brand champions. My name is Sean Atkinson, and I'm wishing you well on your journey to your definition of success. If you find this podcast interesting, helpful, worth the listen, like, share, and subscribe. Leave a positive review so people know to check it out, and I'll see you next time.